Okay, well, welcome to the applicant webinar for the Native American Library Services Enhancement Grant Program. My name's Anthony Smith. I'm the Associate Deputy Director within the Office of Library Services for discretionary grant programs. In this webinar, I'll be providing information about the Native American Library Services Enhancement Grant Program. We will review eligibility, go over the application process, the different application components, and also offer you a few tips and suggestions. Our goal is to help make the application process as easy as possible while helping to ensure that all application requirements are being met. The Native American Library Services Enhancement Grants are competitive grants for up to 2 years and up to $150,000. Cost share is not required. The anticipated period of performance is September 1, 2022 through August 31st, 2024. Federally recognized Indian tribes are eligible to apply for funding under the Native American Library Services Enhancement Grant Program. Entities such as libraries, schools, tribal colleges, or departments of education are not eligible applicants, but they can be involved in the administration of this program, and their staff may serve as project directors in partnership with eligible applicants. By Indian tribe, we mean any tribe, band, nation, or other organized group or community, including any Alaska Native village, regional corporation, or village corporation, which is recognized by the Secretary of the Interior as eligible for the special programs and services provided by the United States to Indians because of their status as Indians. To be eligible for this program, you must have an existing library with regularly scheduled hours, staff, and materials available for library users. Remember, the applying institution must be the tribe itself. If you are an ineligible institution, we encourage you to partner with an eligible institution on a project. While you cannot be the lead applicant, you may apply through a partnership with an eligible institution and receive funding to support activities in that manner. Please also note that a grantee with an active Native American Library Services Enhancement Grant may not apply for another Native American Library Services Enhancement Grant that would have an overlapping period of performance with the active grant. The Native American Library Services Enhancement Grants have 3 main goals with objectives that correspond to each goal. The first goal and objectives correspond to the digital services project category on the program information form, and they are to improve digital services to support needs for education, workforce development, economic development, and business development, health information, critical thinking skills, and digital literacy skills. Objective 1.1 is to support the establishment and refinement of digital infrastructure, platforms, and technology. 1.2 supports preservation and access to information and resources through digitization. The second goal and objectives correspond to the educational programming project category on the program information form, and they are to improve educational programs related to specific topics and content areas of interest to library patrons and community-based users. Objective 2.1 supports the identification of the needs and interests of learners. Objective 2.2 supports the development and implementation of classes, events, teaching tools, resources, and other educational services. 2.3 supports the evaluative assessment of library-based approaches to teaching and facilitation. The third goal and objectives correspond to the preservation and revitalization project category on the program information form, and they are to enhance the preservation and revitalization of Native American cultures and language. Now, this can be done by Objective 3.1, supporting the development of efficient strategic partnerships within, across, and outside Native communities. 3.2 is to support the preservation of content of unique and specific value to Native communities. And 3.3 is to support the sharing of content within and or beyond Native communities. You can find the notice of funding opportunity on our website. Make sure to read the NOFO carefully and follow all the links. Now, pages 6 and 7 of the notice of funding opportunity includes a table that lists all the application components, what kind of format they need to be submitted as, and which file name to use when you're submitting your application package. Please use this list as a checklist of all the documents you will need to submit to us by April 1st. You want to make sure your application is complete so that it's not rejected simply because you missed or forgot one document. So this will give you a sense of the timeline and how the process works. Grant proposals go through peer review. Reviewers will read your proposals and evaluate them to make sure you have responded to the notice of funding opportunity and that your proposed project has potential for success. We will present the reviewers' comments and scores to the IMLS director, who will then make funding decisions based on the reviewers' evaluations and the overall goals of the program and the agency. Announcements will be made in August for a September 1 start date. So to get a better idea about how to align your project with the 3 categories, you can use our awarded grants search. Now, starting on the IMLS homepage, you'll first click on grants at the top of the page and then select search awarded grants. Now, from here, you can search Native American Library Services Enhancement Grants under program and select FY21 under the fiscal year and then hit submit. If you click on an application log number in the results list, you'll find a short description for each one of the awards. And under the description, there's a PDF document you can download, which is the proposal narrative and schedule of completion for each funded project. I'll now review the questions that you should address in your proposal. As part of the IMLS supplementary information form, you will include an abstract. Now, here are some key questions to address in the abstract. Identify the lead applicant and, if applicable, any collaborators. Describe the need, problem, or challenge your project will address. List the high-level activities you will carry out and identify the associated time frame. Identify who or what will benefit from your project. Specify your project's intended results. Describe how you will measure your performance in achieving your intended results. If your proposed project is selected for funding, your abstract may be published online. And so it must not include any sensitive or confidential information. Your application narrative should have three main sections: a project justification, a project work plan, and project results. In your project justification, tell the reviewers which program goal and associate objectives of the National Native American Library Services Enhancement Grants Program will your project address? What need, problem, or challenge will your project address, and how was it identified? So describe how you have used demographic information, economic circumstances, condition assessments, and really any other relevant data from your reliable sources to define the need, problem, or challenge and develop the scope for the project. Who is the target group for your project and how have they been involved in the planning? Now, target group refers to those who will be most immediately and positively affected by your project. Be specific by identifying particular age groups, community members with particular needs, and/or other types of target audiences. Identify the number of individuals in the target group or in each target group if identifying more than one. What are the ultimate beneficiaries for this project? And beneficiaries refer to those who are likely to be aided in the long term by your project. They may or may not be the same as your target group. Identify the number of individuals who will benefit from your project in the long term. If reliable and defensible counts are possible, otherwise describe the characteristics of the beneficiaries you expect to be served eventually by your project. Now, your project work plan section should address the following questions. What specific activities will you carry out in what sequence? What are the risks to the project and how will you mitigate them? Who will plan, implement, and manage your project? What time, financial, personnel, and other resources will you need to carry out the activities? Identify any partner and/or collaborator organizations that will contribute to your project and describe their roles. How and with whom will you share your work's general findings, lessons learned? What data will you collect and how often and from what sources in order to measure your performance in terms of effectiveness, quality, and timeliness? And I'll discuss more about these in just a moment. Does your project include any digital content, resources, assets, software, data sets? If so, be sure to create a digital products plan. Examples of digital products include any data visualizations that are informing the project work, online materials such as web pages about the project, any sort of digital collection content, products, or images of any sort. Now, in terms of project results, what are your project's intended results and how will they address the need, problem, or challenge you have identified in the project justification? And how will the knowledge, skills, behaviors, capabilities, and attitudes of the intended audience change as a result of your project? What tangible products will result from your project? How will you sustain the benefits of your project? How will you continue to support the project its results and or new models that are created beyond the grant period. For example, will there be ongoing institutional and or community support of project activities or products? Do you have demonstrated buy-in from potential stakeholders? What are your plans for sustaining any digitized collections, software, and supporting documentation, information systems, and other technology tools? The Native American Library Services Enhancement Grant Program will use the following 3 performance measurements as a basis for understanding the level of performance by the grant program as a whole and by each award supported through it. For effectiveness, are the activities being supported by the program contributing to improving digital services, improving educational programs, and or enhancing the preservation and revitalization of Native American cultures and languages? For quality, is the program meeting user requirements and expectations? For timeliness, is each activity being completed on time and as proposed? Now, each applicant must identify what data they will collect, how often, and from what source in order to produce these measurements. Consider using the sample performance measurement plan to get started. Next, I'll talk about key components of your application package. Okay, so make sure to include the application components listed in the NOFO and included here on the slide. It is a checklist of requirements right in the NOFO. And again, you can reference the slide. Conditionally required documents are your federally negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, if you plan to use one, and the digital products plan if you're creating any kind of digital product. Now that means it is required if any funds are being used to create any kind of digital product like a website or digital collections. You'll need to include an IMLS budget form and a budget justification following the standard budget categories listed on this slide. In the budget justification, you'll need to explain the purpose and cost breakdown for each expense listed in the IMLS budget form. Now, travel should include $3,000 for IMLS directed travel each year, so that should be included in your budget. Cost share is not required for this program. Okay, so you may submit a reasonable number of supporting documents that supplement your narrative and support the project description. A supporting document should help IMLS staff and reviewers envision your project in greater detail, but they should not be used to introduce new topics nor to continue answers to the narrative questions. Give each document a clear, descriptive title at the top of the first page. You can choose to include any of the supporting documents listed here. Make sure to submit a complete application with all required documents. Don't forget, all key personnel listed must have resumes. Checklist of conditionally required documents. For example, the digital products plan. The federally negotiated indirect cost rate agreement is another conditionally required application component. If you have one and you plan to use it, remember that indirect cost rate at the time of the award stands until the end of the award. And the cost rate agreement must extend through September 2022. And then supporting documents might include needs assessment, letters of support, plans, or reports. Okay, next we'll provide a few tips to help you with the application process. All right. So first, please register early. There are 3 places where you must register your organization in order to be able to submit a proposal. And there's on the screen here, DUNS, SAM, and grants.gov. You must be registered in SAM, which is the System for Award Management. It's important to keep in mind that your SAM registration is good for 1 year and then must be renewed. And it takes time to process the renewal. So we strongly recommend checking your status early on. If it's not your job to track SAM registration, identify the person who does that at your organization, and make sure this is in place well in advance of the deadline. Grants.gov is the portal through which you will file your application. Allow several weeks for the registration process for this part of the activity. Even if you're registered, make sure you know who is authorized for your institution. Usually there's someone at the institution who serves as the point person for grants.gov, and make sure they know their password. So you may want to identify this person early on because staff change, people retire, passwords get misplaced. So it's a good idea to start that early on as well. If you don't know for absolutely sure that this is all in place now, I'd recommend checking on it as soon as we get done today. Again, if it's not something you want to be trying to accomplish, it's not something you want to try to accomplish anywhere close to the application deadline. So here's a few application tips based on our experience. First, get some feedback and revise. Of course, this goes hand in hand with starting early. Ask 2 or 3 people who are not involved in the grant to read the proposal and provide feedback on ideas, on structure, on grammar and spelling. Consider their feedback and revise accordingly. Proofread the final version carefully. Use spell check feature. And coordinate with tribal administration to submit all of your application components through grants.gov, again, well before the deadline. So start today organizing what you need to apply and understanding who in your organization can help confirm DUNS, SAM, and grants.gov registrations first and foremost. Remember to save all your documents as PDF files. Grants.gov cannot convert them for you. So you have to, when it's time to upload your documents, they need to be in PDF format. Upload application files to grants.gov prior to the deadline. I would encourage setting a date prior to the deadline in case something unforeseen comes up requiring additional time. Give yourself that buffer. Use grants.gov workspace. It's a great way to organize the work of the application process in one work environment and with any of your work partners who have a role to play in the application prep and submission process. You can all be coordinated through grants.gov workspace. Um, Be sure to double check the uploaded file against the table of application components in the notice of funding opportunity. Again, that you have that checklist of file requirements in the NOFO. Okay, so for questions about eligibility, your project narrative and project activities, the digital products plan, your budget, including allowability costs, please contact me. My contact information is on the screen. For questions about application requirements and deadlines, please don't hesitate to reach out to our two program specialists, Sheena Afokwa or Maeve Kudrell, and you have their contact information as well. Thank you for listening in, and we look forward to receiving your application. And as always, best wishes from IMLS.